Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Texas Business Court Insider. I'm Andrew Price.
And I'm Rachel Roosth. Today we're exploring how Rule 166G of the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure is helping the Texas Business Court efficiently manage business disputes.
Well, so let's just start with the basics, Rachel. What are Rule 166 and then Subpart G, and how is it being utilized by the Texas Business Court?
Well, Rule 166 is the procedural rule that governs pretrial conferences. For these conferences, courts can consider a wide variety of issues to help streamline the administration and resolution of a case. The court can consider things like discovery schedules, possible stipulations of fact, jury charges, etc. But what's especially relevant to our discussion today is subsection G, which allows courts to consider legal matters that are for the court rather than for a jury to decide.
And it's important to remember, Rachel, that this isn't a new rule. This Rule 166G has been in the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure for a while. It can be utilized and sometimes is utilized by our district courts to manage issues. But one of the things we are seeing is that the business court has become an active user of the rule, and it's enabling the business court and the parties before it to utilize the rule combined with the business court's mission of efficiency and speedy resolution of disputes to kind of move things along.
Exactly. We've now seen two instances of the Texas Business Court using Rule 166G in a proactive manner to decide legal issues before trial. Those two instances were in Marathon Oil Company v. Mercuria Energy America and Primexx Energy Opportunity Fund v. Primexx Energy Corporation.
Well, so let's start with the Marathon case, which incidentally, as we're recording, is in trial, which is the first case to go to trial in the business court. How did the business court utilize 166G to narrow the issues for trial in the Marathon case?
Well, in this Marathon case, the court used Rule 166G to resolve two legal issues, one about the controlling terms of the parties' agreement and the other about the correct theory of damages. The court's use of Rule 166G went hand in hand with the court's requirement in this case that the parties file a joint advisory of early legal issues. That's not the case in every case, but it was required here. After the parties filed that document, the court requested briefing on two issues that the parties had identified, and then the court issued its rulings after the briefing was completed, citing Rule 166G as its authority for doing so.
And can you give us all a sense, Rachel, of what the timing or timeline was between maybe when these issues got raised and when the business court decided them?
Sure. So the timeline for this case in general has been pretty fast. The case was filed in March of 2025. The joint advisory of early legal issues was due on July 25th. The parties' initial briefs were due 2.5 weeks later, and then responses were permitted up to 6 days after that. Then the court issued its rulings in September and October, which were both before this November 3rd trial date.
That's quick.
It really is. So, Andrew, what about the Primexx case? How did the court use Rule 166G in that case?
Well, we've talked about and I think had another episode of Texas Business Court Insider on the Primexx case, but kind of drilling down into how 166G was used in that case. There was not this joint advisory of legal issues. That was not how it got raised or how the court kind of prodded the parties. Instead, what kicked off consideration was a summary judgment in that case. And in deciding the summary judgment, the judge in the business court there cited 166G in dismissing the aiding and abetting claim brought to the court in this summary judgment. But the court went on and also cited 166G in requesting additional briefing related to issues of interpretation of the partnership agreement. and they had not been squarely brought up by the parties briefing in the summary judgment. And so in a sense, the business court was using 166G sua sponte to ask the parties to go ahead and brief an issue that it identified as something that could speed the case along and needed to be decided. And so after receiving the briefing, the court ended up also dismissing claims against some of the defendants based upon that interpretation of the partnership agreement.
What did the timeline look like in this Primexx case?
Well, because of the way it first got raised, it's not exactly the same as what happened in Marathon, but as we talked about in a prior episode, the overall Primexx case is kind of an exemplar for how quickly the business court can resolve complex business disputes. And in this case, the 166G mechanism we're discussing was just part of what the court used to bring Primexx to resolution in a quick manner. So the briefing was requested by the court in early March of 25. The briefing was done by mid-May, and then the court issued its ruling within a week of the briefing being completed. So if you look at it in that context, we're talking 2.5 months from when it asked the parties to tee the issue up to when it got decided. Rachel, what do you think these examples kind of show us as to looking out how the business court may utilize Rule 166G?
Well, I think these cases demonstrate that the business court is really being proactive in speeding up the resolution of the disputes, even where the parties haven't explicitly asked for that resolution. So I think getting these purely legal issues decided early can help the parties focus their efforts on the factual and legal issues that are going to matter most for trial. So I'm really interested to see how the Texas Business Court leverages Rule 166G in the future.
It's certainly a tool in the toolbox that all practitioners before the business court need to be aware of and be willing to utilize. Thanks a bunch to everyone for watching the latest episode of Texas Business Court Insider. If you're interested in our continuing updates, please be sure to subscribe.
And don't forget to check out our Texas Business Court Insider Hub via the link below. It is packed with resources to help you navigate the Texas Business Court.
See you next time.